Welcome to LogisticsSales.com, where today we'll be discussing qualifying leads. So stick around and let's get started. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of LogisticsSales.com, where today, on the segment of the art of prospecting, we're going to be talking about qualifying leads today. I'm your host, Dean, and with me, as always, my co-host, Daman.
Hello.
And Gayle.
Hi, guys.
And as we said, we're talking about qualifying leads today and really the process of determining which lead or prospective customer is going to be a good fit for you or in your product or service. This usually happens during the sales call, and it gives you an idea of where they're going and if and how you can help make their life a little bit easier. And it's very important. It's a great skill to have because this will not only help save you money, but it will help grow your book of business. So, Daman, why is qualifying so important?
Qualifying is important because you have to take your lead and figure out what to do with it. So just if you have a bunch of names on a list, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to bring you business. So now qualifying is that process of just saying, okay, well, are these people actually going to be able to pay me for what I'm offering or the product that I have? So what you're trying to do is you're trying to narrow down your list. So take that lead list and narrow it down by qualifying by asking the right questions, and other qualifications that we kind of have for different industries. For me, it's taking that prospect and just going down the list and saying, okay, hey, can I segment this into a different group of buyers? Can I narrow this list down even further? Can I segment it into different industries? And sometimes even putting it into different industries allows me to get into different verticals and say, okay, well, can I create pitches according to the industry that they're in? And a lot of times, we're not always doing the same pitch for every customer that we go after. And again, depending on your industry, but there's different types of buyers out there. There's different types of products that you may be selling. And for each one, you want to narrow it down. Like I know in logistics, we always talk about, refrigerated, dry service or temperature controlled, heated, flatbed services. There's, different modes of transportation like the train, airplane, pipeline, but there's so many different modes of transportation too that you really want to narrow down your pitch to really make it in line with the customer. And so for me, it's making sure that I get the most guaranteed output for the amount of work that I'm putting in. And if I could do better qualifying, I'll be able to spend more time on those customers and be able to actually create specific pitches to kind of land them as well. And so that's what I'm looking to do, is save that time. And this is what we notice a lot when people typically start off in sales, is that they'll go after everybody because they think everyone's a potential customer. Then you start realizing, okay, hey, these people aren't willing to pay for the service, or these people don't even have a need for that service. And then so you're trying to really narrow it down to that really niche list, and the one that you can really focus and spend your time on to really maximize the best results.
Yeah, I think we've seen it before with some of the younger sales agents we work with, even where they're so desperate to go after the right, or not even the right prospect, but just any customer, just get the work, and they'll put their time in without asking the right questions. And if you don't, we've come into experiences in the past where we've, had somebody pursuing a certain customer, and they've partnered with a carrier that does full truckload services, and then they come to find out without getting to, the service or the need too early in the prospecting process by qualifying them properly, that this company only required less the truckload services. So imagine all that time you could have put in the beginning, which is very minimal, to ask the right question to find out if they even needed a full truckload service. And if they didn't, you kind of cross them off your list to move on. But without doing that, you'd waste a lot of time in the beginning or the qualifying process.
And that's the main thing, is just understanding that you want to save your time and you want to maximize your effort in the right places. There's certain people that you could just automate, certain leads that you could just automate, and there's certain leads that you really want to focus in on. And that's how typically I've gotten my best results too. And even if it's a list of like 1,000 leads, that list is going to dwindle down to about maybe 100 qualified leads, or maybe even a little bit less sometimes. So what I'm really trying to do is narrow it down, so I'm not really wasting my time on trying to message every single person. Some of these ones I know it may not materialize, or the value of that outcome is not really worth the time investment that I'm going to be putting in. So really saying, okay, how do I value my time? And if I really value this time, how can I really give somebody the priority that they need to really focus in on getting them as a customer? Because it's that one-on-one interaction that we have with people. When they feel like it's personalized and we're really going after them directly, that's what's going to convert that lead into a customer. And so in order to do that, we have to qualify them properly by asking the right questions.
Right, great point. Damon just said that you have to value your time, and not just your time, but your ability to deliver the service that you're promising. And by not qualifying properly, and you try and deliver a service that you're not, that's not your wheelhouse or your specialty, you're actually gonna not deliver the type of service they're going to want to or expect they need to get the job done.
Yeah, and I would just say that when it comes to, especially people who are new to like the sales industry or doing sales as a whole, a lot of people get very intimidated by that qualifying stage of going through your lead list, making all those cold calls, asking a couple of those qualifying questions to figure out, okay, are they potentially a good paying customer that I can make down the line, or are they not the right fit for my business? But the real importance to that is just taking that time, maybe taking 2 weeks to go through your prospecting list and just bang out all those cold calls, qualify and reorganize and structure your list, add some more into that. What it really is you working smarter, not harder. And we see it quite often where people, they do the hard approach where they don't really qualify. They just keep calling the same people over and over again that aren't going to be a good fit for their business. And it really is just detracting from the potential that they have of finding those right customers who are going to be easier to land, who are going to appreciate the service, who are going to appreciate the business that we are trying to sell to them because they are that right fit. And so by doing that little bit of extra work at the beginning, it will make your job easier as you progress through your sales career.
Right. So you say the extra work. So Gayle, how do you qualify your prospect?
Yeah, well, there are a number of ways of qualifying your prospects, but basically you just want to assess these potential customers to determine, are they potentially somebody who is going to buy my product or service, and do they need that product or service? One of the best ways that you can actually start to kind of figure out, okay, what is my product? What is my service? How am I of value to other people out there and to other organizations, is to have that ironclad client profile. So a couple episodes ago, we went through the client profile where we actually showed you how to draft that out to figure out what your qualifiers are for you and for your business, what your negotiables, your non-negotiables are. So if you don't have that handy, go look it up. There should have been a worksheet where you worked through your client profile, or go rewatch that episode and then come back to this one to make sure that you have an understanding of who it is that you're going after. And then we can continue on to qualifying these prospects.
And I think one thing that's important to kind of keep in mind is don't get discouraged if someone already says, hey, I already have, this, whether it's a cell phone, whether it's, an automobile, whether it's a house, because things are always going to come up for renewal, right? So I know in our industry, it's always like, I have carriers that I'm currently working with, or we're in a contract for the next, 2 years. There's a lot of things that may come across your way when you are qualifying, but understand that, the potential is there. If there's potential there, then still qualify that customer accordingly. Don't get discouraged by some of these false pretenses where you think like, oh, he's already covered, he's never going to come around. But like in our case, customers, that's how we make most of our business is everyone's already working with somebody, and we eventually wait and stay in touch with them long enough and build that trust and build that rapport that we eventually are able to earn their business and wait for the right time.
Yeah, I would say that the differentiator here is that objections are not disqualifications. Objections are exactly that. They're objections. You can work through them, you can continue, and you can work your way through that process and eventually potentially convert them into a customer. So don't just take objections and say, oh, they don't want our business, off the list. You want to make sure that you are qualifying them based off of the facts, not what they're saying in regards to whether or not they would like to work with you at that first stage, especially because it's most likely going to be your first or second call. They haven't built that connection with you. You don't have that trust yet from them. So objections are going to be very prevalent, especially in that first stage.
Yeah, great point. And as you said earlier, there's so many different ways, when we talk about how to qualify your prospect. And the one framework that we're going to work on and we're going to discuss today with you is the BANT framework. It's budget, authority, need, and timing. So it's great to have these little tricks of the trade, and as you're going through, you just think in your head. So that first piece of the BANT framework is budget, and you want to make sure that your prospect has the financial means to pay for the service or product that you're offering. It's really important to find out earlier on, if there's a need. Because if there's no need, there's no incentive to pay really for what you're offering. So you want to be able to ask those questions and find out where their focus lies. Are they looking, in supply chain? Are they looking for cheap shipping or a quality service? And that's when you need to be able to articulate what you're able to bring to the table. So because again, if they don't have that need, or require the service that you're offering, there's not going to be that great, that incentive to pay for it.
Yeah, that's like that whole hey, which cable provider are you with? And you don't even own a home. So it's like you're asking the wrong person. Unless they become a homeowner, then they'll actually require some of these services. And so some places it's very obvious. Some places it's just hidden.
Yeah. I think like another really good factor, especially in the shipping and logistics space, is like the price of the products your customers are shipping, right? If somebody is moving bottle caps for water bottles, those are probably very cheap and inexpensive. They're not going to warrant paying for premium shipping services. But if somebody's moving electronics like laptops or TVs, they're probably going to want to pay a little bit more because of the value of those goods that are being shipped. So those are different things that you can kind of take into account as well.
Yeah, and we found, in the past, working with other sales agents, starting out in their career, that this sometimes becomes a bit of a conversation that's even hard for them to have, especially when you're new to it. But it's good to ask direct questions and open the door and have those conversations. And the more you do this, obviously the more comfortable you get. And there's some good ways to phrase a question, maybe to get the ball rolling on something like this. Maybe just asking them what budget they've allocated to the project, and that might help them open that topic. And you never know what you find out from the customer when you start asking those right questions.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that question is getting the right information back. So when we're asking questions, we kind of gauge as to what they value, what they're willing to pay for, what their past history has been in making purchases. And so we get to learn a lot of their buying habits in that manner.
Yeah. And I think it's important to talk, in sales, how bad do you want it and how hard are you willing to work? And one of the good skills you should have if you want to build that book of business and be successful and have that life of, you've always dreamt about, is to really do your research, find out not just what your product or service is, but when you're going to talk to a prospect or a customer, you want to make sure what their lanes that they're preferring in logistics, what they really want to see, and have an idea. Like if you know that there's something that they're looking for, refrigerated services coming up from down south in the States into Canada, you should have an idea of what the cost that that this prospective customer would be paying, and have an idea. And then when you start asking those questions, if again they're willing to pay for that service, or are they just looking for that cheapest service. And sometimes customers even go through those hardships until they find out, look, that the cheapest route's not the best route, it's not working for me. And then it opens the door based on the timing. Are you there? Are you following up? And are you talking to that prospect?
And it's our job as a sales rep to show the value, right? Because everybody wants to be cheap from the get-go. So again, is that an objection that we can overcome? Yes, it is. So a lot of these times there's a lot of these objections that we can overcome. If they can't afford it, okay, can we create payment plans for them? We see this, is someone going to spend $1 million, $2 million on a house in one shot? No, he's going to go apply for a mortgage. He's going to actually break it down to a loan. A lot of people do this with their vehicles. A lot of people are not going to write a check for the whole amount right at once. They're going to say, well, hey, you know what? There's pretty cheap financing. Let me see how I could pay this over a certain period of time. So there's so many ways that we get creative in that sales process, and to be able to handle some of those questions when it does come to that budget question that we're trying to find out from the customer or the lead.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned the budget. I think another important one is understanding the budgeting, their budgeting cycle. Depending on the industry, there's, a greater need for certain industries, and in transportation, as the seasonal work, with the way the growing seasons work, it's obviously when the harvest is in, some of the companies, locally where we're out of, want to get things shipped out now, and it's, they want to make sure they find that service that they're looking for, and at times, they need to, they pay for that because it's important for them to get that product out so it doesn't spoil and everything else. And same thing, with peak seasons at Christmas time, it always seems to be a really busy time as well for dry van and reefer shipments across Canada and North America. So it's really important to understand not just peaks in the industry, but the actual cycle that your prospective customer is looking at.
Yeah, and we see this all the time, specifically in trucking and transportation. With a lot of these large corporations, they do things called an RFP, which is a request for proposal. And it's basically just a large bid that goes out annually. Maybe it's January every year, maybe it's the middle of the year in the summer, whatever that company that they structure their bid process off of. It goes out once a year. They send it out to a whole bunch of carriers and they say, bid on the freight. If you win the lane, it's yours for the rest of the year. And so we need to take that into consideration as well. If we're talking to these large conglomerate companies, are they running RFPs? Or do they have bid cycles? And if they do have bid cycles, that's obviously going to line up their budget cycles, because that's how they're going to plan and structure and assign those carriers.
And so there's so many, we've talked about, how to qualify the customer, and obviously asking the right qualifying questions is important. I won't go too much in detail on the lead scoring, because I know Daman later on today's episode, we're going to talk about lead scoring, but basically you want to find out the value of the customer that you're trying to land, and you allocate an actual score to that. So obviously the higher the score, the more time you might want to invest in that customer, and so on. So you're separating your that funnel to know who you're going after and when and for how long. So that's important. And of course, you always want to be able to explore alternatives and show that you're willing to work with them and be flexible, which is huge when it comes into dealing with you and your customer and separating you from everybody else. So moving on, BANT theory, we get to A, which is authority. Daman, what's that all about?
Yeah, so the A in BANT stands for authority, which is also the lead decision maker or the influencer in the buying process. And there's a number of ways to try to find the authority. So you always want to find out who's actually in charge, who's going to make the decision. And a lot of people will come up in their sales pitch and they'll ask, right? Is there anybody else that we need to speak to? Would you be making this decision? Is there anybody else you would like us to send this information to? So a lot of ways that we could try to find out who that authority is. Again, when you're doing the research component of it, LinkedIn is great. That's sort of kind of go-to to find out, okay, hey, which people are the key people in a, whether it's a CEO role, VP role, operations, directors. But in transportation, what we're looking for is actually the transportation manager. And so if it's not the transportation manager, there's a supply chain manager. Maybe it's a warehouse manager. But we're trying to see, okay, who kind of relates into that field and who can actually direct us in the right direction to find the appropriate person that's in charge. Sometimes we notice it's purchasers. Sometimes it's a reception lady that's sitting at the front desk. And so, or that picks up the phone. So there's multiple ways to kind of navigate through that and understanding, you're looking at different things like the size of the organization. How many people do they have? Are people wearing multiple hats or have multiple responsibilities in a company, right? So the smaller they are, the more people are flexible and doing multiple tasks. The larger the corporation, the more employees, the tasks are more divided up. So you're going to be able to have to look for the specific person in charge, right? So yeah, you could ask directly in those phone calls, or in emails, or on LinkedIn as well. People will actually send a message out. Hey, I'm looking for so-and-so. Can you help direct me to the right person? Typically talking to other sales reps, they're more inclined, because they're going through the same thing that you may be, they're more inclined to kind of help each other out and say, hey, you know what, if I was in that situation, I'd probably want that help. So let me try to help somebody else as well. So different ways that we can do that. I like going to people's websites, and taking a look. Sometimes there's like that contact us section or about us, and then you'll start finding key players. And sometimes like they give you all the information, whether it's like the contact name, the emails, the phone numbers, and it makes it really easy for you to kind of send out that first inquiry. And then, there's other like CRM softwares out there as well, CRM tools that we can use. Sometimes your own company organization has different contacts from people that have contacted those people in the past, right? Otherwise, like there's, like these websites where you can find they kind of have CRMs already built into them, where you could type in any company name and it gives you like a list of 10, 20 people that are in that organization. But there's so many different ways to kind of get this data to find out who that person is, and use whatever's comfortable for you.
Yeah, and there's also like a really great way of doing it when you have a few customers that are very happy with your service. Ask them for referrals. Like if they know XYZ company down the street is also looking for the same type of service that they're currently getting from you, why not ask for an introduction? Those are really great ways to have like that soft connection, where you can just get yourself right in the door and you can find out, hey, this is who's in charge, this is the decision maker. You have an introduction. It makes things a lot easier.
Yeah. Other things I like too is you sometimes go to industry events, and trade shows are perfect for this. People that are at the trade shows typically know how the organization works, and they're usually equipped to handle questions from other people. So if you get out and there's a trade show in your area, try to go visit. Even if it's not in your area, try to fly out, depending on what the value of that future sale is to you. It's making a little bit of investment ahead of time for a future, payout later on is great too. And another one I like too is just finding articles online. And sometimes if you're just reading industry news, it's a great way to find new prospects. But you also can look for articles specific to the company that you want to work with. And in some of those articles, it gives you a little bit of insight as to who those key decision makers are and what their roles are in specific.
And I would also say, just don't be afraid of going after like the top honchos for these companies. I mean, it's kind of one of those underrated strategies in sales that most people think, I can't go talk to the CEO. He's too high up. He's not the guy I'm looking for. But why not? Why not give the CEO a call, explain to him what you like, why you're calling, who you are, and what service that you're looking to provide the company and how it'll benefit them. Worst case scenario, he says, hey, look, that's not me. You got to call, John down in the shipping department. But best case scenario, he's like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let me connect you with John in the shipping department. And they're going to be able to use that interaction as like a soft introduction, where you've already got almost like the backing of the boss man, the guy in charge. And so now John in shipping is more inclined to listen to you and hear you out and listen to the pitch that you're going to give him, and may even convert into a customer.
Yeah, there's nothing greater when the president or CEO reaches out to John and said, hey, I want you to give Gayle a call. When the boss tells the shipping manager to give you a call, you're going to get a phone call. So, a little trick that actually with this part of the BANT theory is authority. And Gayle was just talking about, it's okay to go to the president and CEO. In fact, I used a trick not too long ago that Daman had mentioned about going to contact us. And when you go to there, you can sometimes see, at the name of the company or their domain that they're working to. And if you happen to know who the president and CEO is, or somebody higher up in that company's organization, and you reach out to them, I didn't have a contact information, but I reached out to the president and CEO just spelling out the name. And the first time I tried, sometimes if you get the email wrong, it'll kick it back and say it didn't work. But I actually lucked out and typed in the contact information at that domain, and I got a response back from the president and CEO of this international company a day later, and 3 days after that, we were meeting for lunch. So it works. You just got to think outside the box sometimes, and they're great tools to have.
Another tip for people that are watching is, sometimes there's multiple people of authority in the same company. So typically, even if, again, the larger the company, the more people I'm going after in that company. And, I'm looking for any which way to kind of start that conversation. Because sometimes you think this is the main person, but it's not. And then you realize that, it was somebody else the entire time. No wonder I wasn't really getting through. And you're trying any which way to kind of have this conversation or get the ball rolling with somebody. But just understand, don't give up just at one person of authority. find multiple people in a company, go after anyone that you could possibly think of that may play a role. And sometimes even asking the people that you think that are completely maybe oblivious to who the authority is, but ask, right? And just have the ability to maybe ask and understand that a lot of people may not give you that runway right away, but there's a lot of things that happen in like when we talk about transportation, like so many things can happen along the way, whether people can mess up in a situation, people can't deliver on time, there's a service issue, there's an issue with the person and the way that they're maybe communicating. There could be an accident, there could be safety and compliance issues, there could be pricing issues, there could be so many different issues that could pop up at any time that can take someone that hasn't spoken to you in so long for them to just open up the door and say, hey, you know what, now's the right time.
I love it. This is all great stuff. I'm so excited. I don't know about you at home watching the episode, but I just want to start making some more calls and qualify some more customers like right now. That brings us to need. So Gayle, let's talk about need.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. So the N from the BANT theory stands for need, which is basically how do you identify the specific problem that your product or your service can solve for the prospect. And that's what it all boils down to at the end of the day. If they don't have a need for the product or service, why would they buy it? So that's what you need to identify, and then you will need to figure out how to leverage that in your pitches and in your conversation in order to explain to them why they need it. So the first thing you want to do is research the prospect's business. You should have a full understanding of their industry, their product, and potentially any challenges that they may be experiencing based off of what you find out in your research. The next thing is identify pain points. So you want to look for common pain points that we would see in that industry or in that field and specific challenges that they could be facing on a daily basis. We've talked about this one before when it comes to produce companies. One particular challenge that we see quite often repeated again and again are issues with temperature compliance. When the temperatures start to fluctuate, it starts to affect the quality of their products. So that's a typical pain point that we see quite often if you were going after, for example, a produce company. The next thing you're going to want to do is to ask your probing questions. And this is where you're going to start making some discoveries during that first kind of sales call and uncover some of the specific needs that you weren't able to discern or to find out through the research that you did prior to. Some of these, for example, are what challenges are you facing with, in our case, transportation and logistics? Or what goals are you trying to achieve with your shipping and logistics or your distribution of your products? Another one is what's preventing you from achieving the proper distribution of your products. So things like that. And again, they're going to be reworked and rephrased depending on who you're talking to. If it's a technology company versus a food and manufacturing company, the way that you phrase these questions and the specific questions you're going to ask are going to change each time.
And just something else that to give you kind of an extra tip that you can kind of go off of is, even if you're not comfortable making the conversation, you can put these into emails and ask in email format too, and try different ways and different headers to see what grabs attention. How can I maybe guess on some of their needs, right, based on the research that I've done, and try to get them to start speaking to me if I can relate to them. And that's what we're really trying to do, is when we're trying to probe in with some of these questions, is we're really trying to create that relationship and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we have a bunch of solutions. I just don't know which one you need right now. But if you give me a little bit of information, then I could put the right solution to fit your needs. And there's usually just, we always talk about, there's just a handful of needs that most people usually have. So there's really not too many, but just learning how to ask the right question. And again, there's only maybe 4 or 5 questions, 6 questions, but then you can narrow it down once you know which area it's going to go in.
Yeah, and I think what it really comes down to is that understanding. When you're asking these questions, it's all for the betterment of understanding that customer and what that need is for the purpose of being of service, of helping them, of finding a solution that's going to make their lives easier, their business run smoother, their products get to market faster, whatever it is. It's finding a way to be of service to that company, to that prospect, and make their lives a little bit easier. And so another way that we can do this is to listen for specific triggers. When we're having these conversations, when we're on the phone, when we're even on email, even things that we see online, you'll find that there are specific mentions or triggers to issues that they're having, insufficiencies in their businesses, problems with growth in their company. So there's so many different things that you'll see while you're doing your research, while you're having those conversations, while you're kind of doing those discovery emails back and forth, where they'll just drop these little gold mine nuggets of information that seem very inconsequential. But when you start to actually like dig into them a little bit deeper, you'll see, oh, okay, maybe this guy's saying that they're having an issue with their loading times because their warehouse is running on short staff. And so maybe something like that is where you can come in and say, well, no worries, because we offer drop trailers. We can bring a trailer in, we'll drop it off the day before. You guys have all day to load it. Don't worry about it. Take your time. And that takes the stress off of them. So there's these little things that you can pick up in those communications that are going to help you along the way.
Yeah, a couple that I like is, there's a recent conversation we had with a customer, and he was just like, I'm tied up in a contract for the next year, 2 years. And he's saying things like, there's not enough work right now to go around to other carriers. But then all of a sudden, he starts asking a probing question. And for this, I'm listening to this very closely. And he's like, what if I were to offer you a shipment a day and to a certain destination? And then he brought up some insurance needs. He had a high value insurance question in there. So I'm like, oh, okay, all right. So you know what? Even though he's telling me on one side there is no need, on the other side, he's opening up the door. So then you kind of say, okay, well, there is a contradiction in the way that they're communicating. And it must be something that I said that may have triggered it, or maybe it's something that's in the conversation which he triggered himself. And now if you pay attention to that component of it, which is, again, going after like the insurance and saying, okay, hey, maybe we can get competitive here if you can give us more volume. And so being creative in some of those and just listening to some of those questions, it's a great way to kind of highlight it. And for me, I typically eliminate any objections and focus strictly on those plus points where we can actually build a relationship and move the things forward.
Yeah. And that's going to lead us right into another strategy here, which is aligning your features to their needs. You're going to want to actually kind of map out potentially what they're looking for out of a service provider or out of a product, and figure out what parts of your product and service match with what they're looking for. If it comes to like a produce company that's having issues with temperature, maybe it's live temperature tracking and live updates and getting real-time reports for the temperature status of those reefer trailers. If it comes to somebody who's looking for increased insurance, letting them know that we do have those options and that we can go and get the preliminary insurance for increases, for additional cargo needs as needed, but having those conversations and then using them to pitch the person accordingly. Because when you go into a conversation, especially a sales pitch, with that same generic pitch for everyone, your success rates are going to drop significantly. When you start actually tailoring each individual one to the needs of that customer, you're going to find that your results are going to be much better.
And sometimes, Gayle, a lot of people don't even know that they have a need. And that's something where a good salesperson is going to study what they're currently doing. I love this one where you get to ask them about their or you find out about their competitors. And so somewhere along that line, if they start mentioning, oh, hey, we're working with this company, we're working with that company. For me, I'm just evaluating and seeing, okay, hey, you know what? Sometimes I'll give them the feedback like, hey, you are actually with the right fit. But just me having an understanding of which competitor is better at doing which part of the job allows me to kind of focus on, okay, well, I want to sell my strengths, but if they've already got a really strong relationship or a really strong fit for the need that they already have, then I already know that my chances of changing that need is maybe slim to none. But then again, a lot of this is more like advanced sales. When you do it often and you do it and you repeat it enough times, you get to know, where the price point is of your competitors. You get to know which service they're better at and which one we're better at. So you can make those contracts with a company and address that. And the more information that you can give them, sometimes they don't know that they have a need for it until they actually see it. So like being transparent with the customer or giving them more visibility into your processes is another way to kind of land some of these customers and show yourself as being different from the competition.
Yeah, you mentioned being transparent with your customer, and as soon as you bring that wall down, it sometimes open the door for them to be open as well. And not knowing what their need is, if you're still able to sell your service and maybe go above and beyond with some of the other services you're offering, some of those other services may also be a need. We've run into a situation in the past where just dealing with another large company where we were doing a service that was similar to what they needed but weren't even aware that we were doing. The second they found out what we were doing and who we were doing it with, all of a sudden opened the door to say, hey, look, we need that exact same service too. Can you do that for us as well? And next thing you know, just by bringing down the walls and talking about things, it gave the customer the opportunity to say, it's a safe place to talk about this, and they're already doing this. Let's go there. And next thing you know, we're off to the races again. So it's really important with that communication and listening and also offering.
Yeah. And that's where urgency is going to play a huge factor in how you are going to structure your sales, how you're going to rank your top qualified prospects. Because you may find that they have experienced problems, they have a specific need that they're aware of, that you're aware of, that you can kind of fit into that void for them. And most likely somebody who has that urgency is more likely to make a purchase, is going to buy your product, going to buy your service, going to sign contract, whatever that situation is. If it's somebody who currently doesn't have any urgency, Daman was mentioning that they're happy with their current service providers, they're not really wanting to change or really open to it at the time, you don't necessarily want to remove them from your list, because we know that they're a qualified customer. We know that they fit the product and service. And so you do want to continue to maintain that relationship, to continue to build off of it and wait for that opportunity when it comes around. But that urgency for them isn't there. So you sometimes want to focus that attention on the ones who have a need for it at the moment, while still maintaining those contacts and those touch points and slowly building off of that relationship with the ones who are a little bit more closed off. They're not really open to that new opportunity at the moment, and slowly build your relationship and then go from there.
And there's two ways to figure that part out. Is if you're looking at urgency, one is just ask them directly. Is that how soon are you looking to get started? How soon would you like to move that shipment? So there's different ways that you can ask. So depending on which industry again you're in, ask the right questions in the right manner. And the second one is that you can create scarcity. If you create scarcity for your product or service, you'll also be able to sense on their side whether they're eager to pull the trigger on their side or not.
Love it. All really good stuff today. And the last part of the BANT framework is timing. And you talk about timing in so many different ways. You just touched on it, like how soon are you willing to make the purchase, or how soon do you need the service? Sometimes it's right away because there's been a failure in service, and sometimes they're just looking for other opportunities. But timing is so important. I like the example, there's so many people say this one quote differently. Some people say you got to be good to be lucky. Other people say you got to be lucky to be good. I think you have to be hardworking to be lucky, and you have to be hardworking to be good. And if you're hardworking and putting in the work, the timing part of the BANT theory comes into play, because you reach out to a prospect one time and you have, this templated maybe email that you send out to everybody. If you look at the click rate and how many people actually read it, the first and only time, if you just do it once, probably not that productive, and again, not very successful. But if you're able to make significant touches, because we've talked about in this past too, it's about 7 to 11 touches with a new prospect to actually land that prospect. So very rare do you pick up the phone and say, hey, look, we've got this service, we'd love to work with you, we understand, you run this lane, it's a strength of ours, let's talk. And they say, yeah, in fact, let's sign a contract, and can you start tomorrow? Doesn't happen. And if it does, it's once in a blue moon. So, if you put yourself out there enough, that may happen. But I think it's more important to continuously do that and make those touches and find out.
And we've talked about timing a few times already, Dean, and some of the ones that we may want to recap for the viewers is that seasonality. Another one to kind of mention is, the contract changes or contract when they expire. It could be new projects and developments that they told you about. It's the again, seasonality for their product, but there's also seasonality when it comes to like winter, spring, summer. Sometimes, in summertime, there's more summer related activities that are happening, or the cruise ships are moving more often. People are going more to the beach and people are eating more, going out. Whereas winter, you're going to have the opposite experience. People are kind of staying more indoors and you're having more people kind of stay in. But then it's the biggest retail season of the year as well, is the winter time when you're focused on certain holidays. But there's so many things that when it comes to the timing that become relevant for trying to land that customer, and just knowing to get them right before that season starts. Don't get them in the season because they're already really busy into it, unless you have the capacity to handle a surge right away. But also, like, there's other things like timing when it comes to like personnel change. And so when people change companies, sometimes people get fired, new people come in. That's a perfect time too to start with a business. Or when they're starting to build a new location out. So if they have different branch offices when they're going out, that's another thing that I look for, is like new developments. Anytime there's a new development coming up, I'm like, they're gonna need some services, right? Or there's changes happening within their organization. Maybe we could capitalize on that change by helping them.
And finally, part of the last couple pieces we're going to touch on today with the need is the competitor evaluation. Sometimes if you're having that conversation, it's okay to ask, are they evaluating any other potential providers? And if there's a timeline for the comparison, there's so many different factors there that come into play. And of course, the follow-up timing. When would be a good time to follow up with them? You want to stay on the radar. If you just make that one touch and you disappear and the need comes up, you're probably going to be the furthest from their mind. But if you're constantly making tasteful touches and you're not bombarding them over and over, but just you're periodically reaching out, letting them know, hey, are you okay? Know that we're here to help if we can. If something were to come up, if the timing is perfect and you just make it on that right day, if you continuously follow up and say, I'm so glad you reached out because we just had this problem, wonder if you can help us out. Or if you're looking at articles, or you see there's something happening, you could think of them and say, hey, I noticed this is happening in your industry right now. I can only imagine it's causing a problem for you. If we can help you with this, let us know. And boom, you might get that return phone call. So all very important key points to consider as you're going through this. Which brings us to lead scoring. We briefly touched on it, Daman, but why don't we dive into that a little bit deeper?
Okay, thanks for that, Dean. Lead scoring. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, Dean, but it's important to know what lead scoring is and how it works. And what lead scoring does is it assigns a numerical value to each prospect, and it's kind of based on different criteria for that prospect. And based on the criteria, you can give it a point value to let you know that if it's a better qualified lead, or if it's one that doesn't score. Like, the higher the score, the more chances that you want to go after it. And the lower the score is probably a little bit lower on your to-do list. And again, you want to spend the most time on the prospects that bring you the most value. And so you really want to see, okay, where's that payout? Where's it going to make it worthwhile for me to be doing this sales job and to get the production numbers that I need to kind of maintain my lifestyle or to even move ahead in my career. And so a lot of times, I know for myself, I'm doing this in my mind, where I'm just qualifying customers and just giving it that score. But I do use different metrics when it comes to that. For me personally, it's looking at the size of the company, the organization, what that ultimate value can be if I were to land this customer. I look at the nature of their product and I try to value and say, okay, well, what's their commodity that they're trying to ship? And is it valuable enough for them to be willing to pay for the service? And is there any rush on it? So I'm looking at, okay, well, does it have a limited shelf life? Is there any expedited needs that they require? Because I'm looking at my strengths, I'm trying to pair it up with the customer as well. Because if I can pair up really well, if my strengths match up really well with this customer, then the chances that we're actually going to be able to work together is a lot higher. So I'm already qualified based on that, but it's already kind of happening in my mind. And so I'm going to give you a couple of factors here, and maybe we can put up the sheet, but to show you what maybe a form would look like for qualifying a client based on lead scoring. And ideally, I would recommend that, one is you can use it for yourself and you can implement it into your CRM. Secondly, what you can also do is use it for new employees. So if you're training new employees and you're not sure how to really train them well, but to get them into the right mindset, I would definitely use something like this to see, whether they're qualifying properly. Are they spending that time and energy in the right places? And so here's a couple categories that I would look into. So based on the example that we have here, it's industry fit. Do they fit well into what we want, which industry we want to target? What's their shipping volume look like? Are they a large shipper? Are they a medium-sized shipper? Are they a small shipper? So if they're a large shipper, we're going to assign them like 10 points. If they're a medium-sized shipper, maybe 5 points. If they're not shipping that much, maybe a score of 3 points. But as long as they are shipping, we can look at geographic region as well. So based on the area that we want to focus on, like for some companies are better from the West Coast, some companies are better from the East Coast. So you want to take a look at geographic and say, okay, well, which area are we trying to service better? And it's like time zones play a factor into this too. If you're on the West Coast, you're going to be in a different time zone, maybe Pacific time. If you're on the East Coast, you're on an Eastern time zone, which is like a 3-hour difference. So depending on your work hours, you want to kind of gauge which companies are going to be in your best fit. Timelines, which we talked about earlier, budget, which we also talked about. But yeah, for me, it's again looking at that budget. Do they have the affordability to work with us? Are they looking just for the cheapest carrier, or are they actually looking for something of value? Their current provider, I look at that as well and say, okay, well, if they already have a current provider that's a really good fit for them, and that can handle the business that they're actually taking on from this customer, then I'll be like, okay, you know what? The chances of me getting in here are probably a little bit slim, but if there's still a chance, I'm still going to rate it accordingly. And yeah, there's a couple other ones on here, like fleet size, the access to the decision maker, their needs for logistics at the time, and then level of engagement is big as well. Like if they're actually communicating with me, I'm definitely going to try a lot harder to close that deal versus a customer that's not communicating with me as well.
Yeah. And I think that kind of leads us right into this next section here. We've talked about what is qualifying. We talked about the BANT theory. We talked about lead scoring. So how do you find those answers? Like the answers to all those questions that we are asking in every section of this episode. And that comes down to how do you ask those qualifying questions? So there is a number of ways that you can get it. You can do your research. You can go through additional contacts and connections. But realistically, the number one way that you're going to get the rest of these answers that you couldn't find out online through your research answered is by asking them. Now, the caveat to this is you don't want to bombard a prospect with 100 different questions like, who's the decision maker? What's your budget? What's your timeline? That will be very overwhelming. And honestly, it will turn them away from you as a service provider because you become more work for them than you are somebody who's offering to help fix an issue.
And it doesn't have to be in the first conversation that you have to have all these questions lined up and need all these answers right away. If it's a discovery call, yeah, definitely. But if it's not a scheduled meeting, then figure out ways to kind of drop it in one at a time.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I was going to get to next here is when you are making that first, and maybe it's an initial cold call, you should have already done some preliminary research, have an idea of some of the questions or the answers to some of the questions you may want to ask, and have maybe 2 to 4 questions that you'll ask in that discovery call and that cold call. And even then, you want to assess it. If they're really open and they feel like it feels like they want to answer all of these questions, maybe ask a couple more. But if they are really busy, you can tell they just want to get off the phone. Maybe you just reduce it to 1 to 2 questions and you just get an email and send them the follow-up questions that way. And you also want to use them for your staging. We talked about that 7 to 11 touches. You can use these questions in your follow-up strategy to maintain that connection, to build that relationship, and to get the answers that you're going to need to properly qualify those customers. So just as a quick summary of the kind of areas you're going to want to find answers for, you need to find out what their need is, and you need to find out if they're experiencing any pain points. The next one is budget and pricing. Again, this may not be your first call. Maybe your second call, it may be fourth call. It might be through email that you'll find out a little bit more about their budget and pricing, but eventually you will need to have a bit of an assessment on what their budget and pricing needs are. The next is decision-making process. You want to find out who's the decision makers, who's involved, are there key influencers that are going to have an impact on whether or not they decide to go with you or somebody else. So finding out who the key players are is going to be extremely important, and what their process is from, hey, this is me, this is my cold call, I would like to work with you, to let's sign this contract, let's do business together. What does that process look like for them? The next is obviously timelines. They may be very quick, like, hey, let's get going, let's get this signed and get started tomorrow. Or it could be that they're under contract and we may have to wait a whole year until the next bidding process in order to get in the door. But finding out that will give you an idea of where you should be focusing your attention. Should you be spending, 3 hours a day working on this customer if their process and their timelines is saying that you're not going to be able to even bid till next year? Probably not. But if it's somebody who's really passionate about getting you onboarded, somebody who's ready to get started next week, that may be someone that you're going to invest a lot more time and energy in at this present moment. The next is their current solutions and competitor evaluation. You want to find out who's currently servicing them, who's servicing their needs, and what kind of service are they providing? Is it stellar service? Are there no issues? Or are there hiccups and hurdles that they're having to go through that potentially you could fix and become the better alternative as a service provider? Then, of course, shipping volumes and needs for us in transportation and logistics, that's extremely important. We specialize in full truckload. So if somebody, say, is only shipping less than truckload, maybe a couple pallets here, a couple pallets there, they may not be the ideal customer. So having those kind of conversations and asking those questions will give you an idea, do they fit the needs that you service? If, for example, if they are doing crude oil and you do dry van service, that's probably not a good fit, because what's going to happen with crude oil and a dry van? Not very many good things. But if you are doing tanker service and they're a crude oil company, that may be an ideal fit. So you have to look at that and assess it based off of your service and their needs. And then, of course, the next one is growth and future needs. Potentially, there are some smaller companies, up-and-coming companies that are going to experience large amounts of growth in the coming years. So having that conversation of, like, are you expecting to expand? Are you going to be opening additional warehouses? How can we support you with the growth of your infrastructure? That not only comes across as you being genuinely interested in their well-being and the development of their company and the success of their organization, but also helps you plan and structure the expansion of the business opportunity that you'll have together. So, and then the last step is to analyze your engagement. You want to track that interaction between the customer and yourself. A lot of email services that you can pay for salespeople will monitor your click rates, your open rates, response rates, anything like that. Especially if you're doing large email campaigns. So let's say you had 10,000 prospects and you narrowed them down into 100 per category. Maybe it's food companies, maybe it's produce companies, maybe it's electronic companies. You're going to have different campaigns for each of those types of industries. And if you're sending out mass emails for just kind of those interconnection points between your actual conversations, you want to find out, are they opening your emails? Are they reading them? And if they're not, then you can go back to the drawing board, tweak it, make some changes, and hopefully get some better response rates out of that.
Thank you, Gayle. So, we kind of go back to like that funnel of how do we get leads and qualify them? And so if we put up the next image here or slide, we see, 1,000 leads will dwindle down to about 100 prospects, which will further dwindle down to maybe 10 customers if you're lucky. Right? So depending on the industry, sometimes you have a higher success rate, sometimes it's a little bit harder to land that customer. But what you ideally want to do is segment the leads that are coming in. You want to take the leads and you want to qualify them and then start putting them maybe into different categories. And maybe it's according to, again, geographic location, maybe it's according to the industry that they're in, but start segmenting these leads so you kind of are starting to filter through and be more focused. Don't leave leads like lying all over the place. Start putting them into different categories so that when you call one category, it makes it easier to have those phone calls, or it makes it easier to have those conversations, because you're going to be talking and repeating the same thing over and over again. But now imagine you had to do that between going from one lead to the next lead, and they're all different industries and they're all totally different categories. Now you're going to be having to shift every single time. But now what we want to do is say, let's maximize our time and energy. into the right places. And so segmenting is going to allow us to be able to be more focused on those calls. And then the follow-up is going to be the most important thing. The follow-up is what gets you from prospect to customer. It's understanding that if I keep continuing to meet the needs of this customer and I keep following up and I'm waiting for the right timing and I'm doing everything that kind of Gayle talked about ahead, right before we kind of got into this, but she mentioned the budget is going to come into place. There's going to be timing. There's going to be the right person that we're speaking to. There's so many things that we kind of have to get into line, to get into alignment for us to land that customer. And hopefully the follow-up is what's going to really get you into that mindset of saying, okay, hey, you know what? I'm going to qualify until I land it.
Yeah, and I think that image hopefully puts things in a perspective for all our viewers. And it's not intended to intimidate or overwhelm anyone. It's just, I guess, a reality of the business. If you were to break this down into its simplest form, with 1,000 is a good base number to start with, because again, that gets you to about 100 qualified prospects. And so if you want to break it down to, if you just had 100, you're looking at maybe qualifying 10 of them to get one customer. So out of every 100 gets you a customer. That's why we're always talking about continuing to fill that funnel. You always want to keep building that funnel and keeping, more and more prospects to qualify. Because it's a lot of work. It's hard work, and if you want it and worth going after, of course, if it was easy, everyone would do it, right? So take a look at that and build your prospect list and your funnel so that you can continuously keep going after and pursuing your dreams.
Yeah, just to add on to what Dean was saying there, it does look like a lot of work when you go, oh my goodness, I got to figure out all of the answers to all of these questions for 1,000 different prospects. Just keep in mind that if you don't properly qualify your prospects, what happens is you end up having to make double, triple, if not quadruple the amount of calls and connections in order to find a few customers, because you haven't put in the work. You haven't properly qualified and figured out their needs and figured out how best to pitch them and to find solutions for the problems that they're experiencing. So that qualification phase is actually going to ultimately reduce your workload in the long run. It does seem a bit daunting, especially if it's your first time ever doing it. But I promise you, if you just sit down, you grind out the work, it will pay off. But if you don't do it, you will pay for it in the long run. With that in mind, talking about doing work, we do have a worksheet for you. So you can go ahead and you can download that. This one is all about prospecting and qualifying leads, which is super important. So I do highly encourage everyone to take some time, fill it out, and let us know if you have any questions, and we'd be happy to help.
Awesome. Thanks, Gayle and Daman. Great episode today with a lot of really good stuff, but really it shows you the importance of being able to systematically evaluate your leads. By doing this, you'll be able to focus your efforts on the ones you're most likely to convert, which is going to be very important, improving your sales efficiency and help you, again, go after what it is that you desire with the rest, with your life. And that's what we're here for too. We want to be with you every step of the way and help you however we can. Next episode, we're still on the art of prospecting. We're going to be talking about understanding your customer needs, which again, another very important factor to have going through your prospecting process and building your book of business. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into what motivates the prospect to make the changes or buy your product or service. And it's going to be really separating you from the rest of the salespeople that are just picking up the phone, trying to make a transactional call and not build that relationship with us. So important, especially if you want a long-term partnership. And we're going to help you find a way to leverage your product or service moving forward. So we hope you enjoyed today's episode. We're looking forward to seeing you next time. But until then, take care and good luck.
Bye, guys.